What if I told you that in the glittering halls of the Victorian age, where silk gowns rustled and gas lamps flickered, the ultimate symbol of beauty was not jewels, not hair, not even a flawless face, but a waist so tiny it could break a ribcage? Welcome back to the channel, my friends. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because tonight we're re-stepping into one of the strangest and most disturbing beauty rituals in history. In the 19th century, there was only one word that defined beauty: thin. The ideal woman's waist measured just 16 inches, as narrow as a thunderbolt, as fragile as a candle. Women squeezed themselves into steel-boned corsets, laced tighter and tighter until breathing became a luxury and fainting was part of fashion. But corsets and diets were not enough. Society demanded more. The pressure to be thinner, smaller, lighter drove women to seek methods beyond reason. And so, in whispers first, and then in advertisements, a horrifying cure emerged: the tapeworm diet. Imagine it: swallowing a pill laced with tapeworm eggs, allowing a parasite to take root inside your intestines. Month after month, the worm would grow, stretching longer, hungrier, feeding on everything you ate. Each calorie stolen, each meal consumed not by you, but by the silent guest inside your body. The promise was simple: a tiny waste without effort. Eat as much as you want. The tapeworm will eat it for you. No hunger, no diets, no self-control. Just slip the pill down your throat, and beauty will follow. But beauty had a cost. Devours did not always stay in the intestines. Some crawled into the lungs, gnawed at the liver, even burrowed toward the heart and brain. They could grow up to 30 feet long inside the human body. And when it was time to remove them, doctors sometimes resorted to nightmarish methods: sliding a metal rod down the throat, hooking the worm, and dragging it out while the patient writhed in agony. All for the sake of fashion. All for the dream of a 16-inch waist. This was not a beauty hack. It was a pact with death. If corsets squeezed women from the outside, the tapeworm promised to sculpt them from within. And in the fevered imagination of the Victorian age, this was not madness, it was marketed as medicine. Advertisements appeared in newspapers, disguised under elegant fonts and persuasive promises. Eat whatever you wish and still lose weight. Guaranteed results without effort. Some even showed drawings of a graceful lady sipping tea, while a discreet caption whispered, "With the aid of our intestinal friend." The language was carefully chosen. No one wanted to say worm. Instead, they called it the dietary aid, the slimming solution. The truth that a parasite would grow, stretch, and curl through your gut was left unsaid. But women bought into it. Why? Because society demanded impossible perfection. A 16-inch waist could not be achieved through moderation alone. It required sacrifice. And when sacrifice became unbearable, desperation took its place. Imagine a young woman in 1880s London, flipping through a ladies' magazine. On one page, she sees the season's latest gowns, each cinched tight to show off that lightning bolt waist. On the next, she sees the discreet ad, a small capsule, a promise of transformation. She hesitates, then she orders. The capsules often came from apothecaries or were smuggled under the counter. Their origins were murky. Were they truly laced with tapeworm eggs? Or just flour and chalk? Sometimes no one knew. But enough women swallowed them to keep the trade alive. And some of them, tragically, worked exactly as promised. Reports from doctors began to surface. Women arriving at clinics with fevers, emaciated faces, strange abdominal pains. Sometimes during an exam, a writhing shape was glimpsed. The diagnosis: tapeworm infection. Yet even then, some patients refused treatment. They would rather keep their silent guest than risk losing their fragile waistline. In their minds, the worm was not an enemy. It was a partner in beauty. Society reinforced this belief. Fashion journals praised the willowy look. Aristocrats admired ladies who seemed impossibly slender. Gossip whispered cruelly about those who were too plump. In such an environment, the worm became not just tolerated, but coveted. This was the madness of the craze, that what should have been feared was instead desired. The parasite became a beauty accessory, hidden in flesh rather than worn on the body. And while some women wasted away, others swore by it. The thin waist became a ticket to social approval, to marriage prospects, to the illusion of control over one's destiny. But beauty was never in their control. It belonged to the parasite. Behind every promise of effortless beauty lurked a reality far more horrifying than corsets and fainting couches. The tapeworm diet was not merely reckless, it was deadly. Women who swallowed the so-called slimming capsules often began with only mild symptoms, a strange loss of appetite, occasional nausea, dizziness. At first, they thought it was working. "The worm is eating for me," they whispered with relief. But the relief never lasted. Soon came stabbing abdominal pains, fevers, diarrhea that left them trembling with weakness. Some noticed a creeping sensation inside, as if something alive was shifting within their belly. And indeed, something was. The tapeworm, once hatched, did not remain a polite tenant in the intestines. It grew relentlessly, segment by segment, until it could stretch up to 30 feet, 9 meters long. Its hooked mouth latched to the intestinal wall, feeding off every morsel of food. But sometimes, that was not enough. Medical reports from the late 19th century described cases where worms migrated into the liver, where they caused abscesses, into the lungs, where they provoked violent coughing and bleeding, into the eyes, blinding the host, and even into the brain, triggering seizures and madness. A silent diet partner had become a murderous invader, and when it came time to remove it, the treatments were almost worse than the disease. Doctors would sometimes starve the patient for days, hoping the parasite would loosen its grip. Others prescribed bizarre lures, feeding garlic, milk, or honey to tempt the worm to crawl upward. But when these failed, darker methods emerged. One of the most chilling involved a long, thin rod of metal, slid through the throat and down into the stomach. The physician would then twist the rod, attempting to hook the worm and pull it back up through the mouth. The patient, gagging and writhing, often fainted before the procedure ended. Imagine the horror. A young woman, once dreaming of beauty, now lying pale and broken, as a writhing ribbon of parasite is dragged from her body inch by inch. And sometimes, even after days of torment, the worm refused to come out, leaving the woman to die of exhaustion or infection. Newspapers occasionally reported such cases, tucked away between columns on society balls and parliamentary debates. But these stories were not widely shared. After all, who wanted to admit that the price of a fashionable waistline could be blindness, madness, or death? Yet the whispers spread. The tapeworm cure became a ghost story among mothers, warning daughters not to seek beauty at such a cost. But like many dark secrets, the danger only added to its allure. For in an age where thinness was purity and indulgence was sin, some were willing to embrace death itself if it meant slipping into a dress cut for a 16-inch waist. The tapeworm diet was more than a grotesque fad. It was a mirror held up to the soul of the Victorian age. An era obsessed with appearances, terrified of indulgence, and willing to sacrifice health, dignity, even life itself on the altar of beauty. To understand why women embraced such horror, we must step into their world. The 19th century was not kind to the female body. Medicine was primitive, sanitation poor, and childbirth deadly. Water was unclean, food often contaminated. Infections killed as swiftly as bullets. In such a world, inviting a parasite into your belly did not seem as insane as it does today. Death was everywhere. One more risk hardly mattered. And yet, this risk was different, for it was voluntary. Women did not stumble into the tapeworm cure by accident. They chose it. they sought it. They paid for it. Why? Because the price of not conforming was, in its own way, just as deadly. A plump figure meant ridicule, gossip, rejection. It meant fewer suitors, fewer chances to climb the social ladder, fewer opportunities to be taken seriously. Thinness, on the other hand, was treated as virtue. To be small was to be pure. To shrink was to be admired. And so, faced with the crushing weight of society's gaze, some women struck a deal with the devil inside. Better a worm in the belly than shame in the ballroom. The tapeworm craze faded as medicine advanced. By the early 20th century, doctors began condemning it more openly, calling it dangerous quackery. Public health campaigns warned against parasites, and the medical establishment slowly shifted society's understanding of disease. But the legacy remained. Even now, echoes of the Victorian obsession survive. Modern diets promise effortless transformation. Pills, powders, teas, injections. Social media glorifies impossible standards, whispering the same poison. You are not enough. Be smaller. Be thinner. Disappear. The methods may have changed, but the hunger, the desperate yearning to fit a cruel ideal, remains the same. And perhaps that is why the story of the tapeworm diet still haunts us. It is not merely a tale of worms and waistlines. It is a story of how far people will go when society convinces them their natural selves are unworthy. Anna Swan, the giantess with the widest pelvis, and the nameless women who swallowed tapeworm eggs, different stories, yet bound by the same thread, a world that measured their worth not by their humanity, but by their bodies. So when we look back on this dark chapter of history, we must ask ourselves, has the story truly ended? Or have we simply traded worms for weight loss ads, corsets for Photoshop, and whispered pills for influencer endorsements? Perhaps the real parasite was never in the belly at all. Perhaps it was in the mind and the belief that beauty must be bought, suffered for, even died for. And that, my friends, is the darkest lesson of all.